The Green Bay Packers finally set Jaire Alexander free, and it has a profound effect on Jalen Ramsey and his next destination. We will discuss that today on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open, and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. It is the podcast designed to teach you everything about all of the ongoings and things and current events of the National Football League with use of clips from all the local experts from the Locked On Podcast Network. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On NFL show, joined today by Ross Jackson of Locked On Saints and a whole bunch of other jobs that we ain't gonna start mentioning right now, but that's my brother. We are going to tackle some of the big issues of the day. We're going to talk about the Colts and their quarterback issues in segment 3. We'll give mention to the Miami Dolphins too. That's because they're trying to trade away somebody that, well, something happened this morning and it might have an impact on that. We'll get to that. Right smack in the middle of the show, Caleb Williams' big battle. It is not with the media. It is not winning games for the Bears. It is being better than somebody else in the draft that he was drafted in, Jaden Daniels. But I'm not going to mention Jaden Daniels. I'm going to tell you why Caleb Williams' problems is even bigger than that with another quarterback from that draft. We'll talk right now at the top of the show about one Jaire Alexander, who is now finally free. It was reported on NFL right before recording. It was reported by the NFL and confirmed by our Locked On NFL host, as well as Mr. Peter Bukowski, that Jaire Alexander is going to be set free by the Green Bay Packers. Ross Jackson, come on in. This is something that we all have kind of anticipated. I think the timing for this is a little bit interesting.
Yeah, I do too. It is really interesting. And look, this is an opportunity usually for players to kind of tinker with their roster. Usually when we talk about signings in June and July, we're not talking about guys that can make a roster. This is one of those rare instances where we're talking about a player that can make somebody's roster better at this point in the offseason. So this is a really interesting one. But I agree with you. I think that the timing is really interesting because I think it's about more than just post-June 1 transaction business.
That's why it's so interesting, because people say, well, they could have done this early, or as soon as the draft was over, this is what they wanted to do, they would have done it. But first and foremost, I got a clip from Peter Bukowski. It is not the announcement that he's leaving. It's one that says it looks like he's staying. That's why I said the timing is interesting, because the threshold for timing went by and he was still there. So Peter probably thought, wait a minute. But there's some things that Peter says in here, and this is what I want you to realize. Why is Jaire Alexander so important to new teams or prospective new teams? Listen to Peter talk about the importance that he has to Green Bay while admitting that they really don't need him. Check this out.
It's looking more and more like Jaire Alexander is going to be a Green Bay Packer in 2025. If he is, it will raise Green Bay's ceiling more than any move any other NFC contender made this offseason. It's really great for the Packers that they were able to have a very good defense without Jaire Alexander, that they were able to blanket the Philadelphia Eagles receivers without Jaire Alexander. And what I have been consistent with all offseason is they don't need Jaire Alexander to be a good defense in 2025. That remains true. If they get him back, though, it helps a lot. I don't know if you know that about having good players. It helps a lot. But if they didn't, if they shipped him out or just cut him or whatever, if he was not on the team, I would say, I think this can be a top 10 defense in 2025. We know how good this defense can be.
Now, look, Peter Bukowski has just told you two different things. They could be a top defense in 2025. You know how good they are without him. Essentially, they signed Nate Hobbs from the Raiders, who was a nickelback last year, one of the best in the league. And I hear they're going to play him outside, similar to the way Jordan Lewis was signed by Jacksonville, and he's going to play outside. However, this is more about Peter telling you, because Green Bay is considered a contender. Peter is telling you, he was telling you what they would add by bringing Jaire back. Now, you can now put yourself, if you're Baltimore, if you're Philadelphia, if you're any of these contending teams, and just change the name. This is what you're getting when you get Jaire Alexander. This is what those teams that have made runs, that have gone out and gotten guys like Stephon Gilmore. at the last minute. And people always say this, Ross, well, if he was available, if he was any good, he wouldn't be available. That is not true.
That's not how the NFL works.
No, that's not how it works. Maybe him and his agent was like, let's not do nothing. Let's just sit back and wait and see where we can go and get us a champion. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So you don't have to just stop managing your money and start building wealth. That's what you need to do, is start building wealth, not just managing your money. You have surprising insights, all in one convenience and easy collaboration, which makes managing your money very, very easy with your partner. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. With my man Ross Jackson here to start the second week of June, mini camps and all of that stuff, getting it on. And there's a lot of football to be played. One place that football is going to be played with big eyes on it is the Windy City in Chicago. A lot of talk about Caleb Williams and his pre-draft issues and whether he wants to be in Chicago. He wants to be in Chicago. He got a bigger issue. And it ain't just Jaden Daniels. And I'm not going to mention that name again when it comes to Caleb Williams, because too many times people mention that name because of his success.
Right.
There's another little ghost, though, one that was chosen in the same draft. First, we're going to hear about Caleb Williams, and then we'll talk about him. Listen to my man, Lauren Cox. Listen to Lauren Cox, my buddy, talk about Caleb Williams.
The bottom line is Caleb Williams loves being here and has left no doubt that he loves being here. And I think we don't have to worry about this being a continuing problem in the future because of the type of competitor that he is. He sees being the greatest Bears quarterback of all time as a challenge that he wants to strive for. And he is not the kind of competitor who's just going to quit on that at the first sign of trouble, right? If he was going to quit at the first sign of trouble, he would have done that during his rookie season.
Ross, I'll tell you this. Some of the feelings about Caleb Williams, I had them, right? But then when you watch it, some of us can let it go. There are others, the draft thing got them in the headlock, man, and they're going to look at those numbers and look at other players. Mm-hmm. I believe the player that I'm not going to mention anymore really gives everybody a blind spot when it comes to Caleb, because one guy had a bunch of success and Caleb didn't.
Yeah, I think we oftentimes affix expectations of the norm based on the outlier and everything. And there are players that are absolutely the outliers, right? You'll hear people all the time, well, this person did it, and so that person can do it too. But then you ask them to name like 7 more people that have ever done it. We hear it here in New Orleans all the time. Like, oh, Drew Brees was sub 6 foot or 6 foot as a quarterback. So anybody that's young and, short can play quarterback. No, there's a reason why guys like Drew Brees, Kyler Murray, guys, I'll go back to Doug Flutie, right? These players that have found some level of success as shorter quarterbacks, there's a reason why they get shouted out, because the list is short, right? And so when you look at that, you can't compare that to the norm. You have to give those guys credit for being the outlier. You have to look at everybody else on the line of the norm. And I think that that's what Caleb Williams deserves, not to be compared to the outlier, but to be compared to what the rest of the NFL typically looks like for rookie quarterbacks, which is a struggle.
It is a struggle, especially at that position, especially when you do have some stuff pre-draft that people look at funny and go, I don't remember anybody being like that and winning. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So those outliers are hard to manifest, but to show you how the difference is with Caleb and other quarterbacks because of expectations not named the guy in Washington. Mm-hmm. I'm going to show you the expectations right now of someone who statistically wasn't even as good as him and who should have more questions about him, but he doesn't because of the perception. And that's where I'm going with my man Nick Cattles up in New England with Locked On Patriots. And you'll hear the difference in just the feeling and the temperature about this young quarterback.
I believe in Drake May. I believe in his ability to learn this offense and do the most with this offense that he possibly can. Now, why do I believe it? It's not that I just have blind belief and faith in May. It's because of what we've seen so far. Last year, Drake May had Alex Van Pelt as his OC. That was May's third offensive coordinator in 3 years. That was really his third different offense in 3 years. So not only was he jumping up a level from college to the NFL, he was also dealing with a completely new offense that he had not.
The man had 2 offensive coordinators in Chicago in 1 season.
Right. I was about to say, somebody else had 3 different offensive coordinators in 2 years.
but you see how we can look at something and go, he ain't that good. And now, granted, both hosts took up for their guy, but I'm talking about people in the media. Everyone in the media is saying, I like what I saw in little Drake May. But then with the other guy, they're not giving him that same grace. And I think it ain't for these other dumb reasons that we could get into.
Sure.
But what it is it's the number 1 pick. It's the fact that he carries himself in a way that a lot of people aren't used to. I wouldn't say comfortable with, because they don't do anything to anybody. But then the success of another guy has made it look like it's almost Hutchinson and Trayvon. If you listen to people talk about Trayvon Walker, you wouldn't even think he had 21 sacks the last 2 years, would you? No, because he ain't all of a sudden all pro after only 2 seasons. And that's why people do this. But it doesn't take away from the fact that he's still a really, really good player.
Yeah, absolutely. It's astonishing the difference between being the number 1 overall pick and the number 3 overall pick, right? As a number 1 overall pick, everyone wants to be right about you being the wrong choice. As a number 3 overall pick, everybody wants to be right about you being the right choice. Like, that's typically how these conversations are going to go. I don't look as smart as an analyst if I say the number 1 pick was a good pick, but I look a little bit smarter if I say the number 3 pick was an outstanding pick and I got questions about the number 1 pick, right? Like, we got to remember that for a lot of these conversations, there are those of us that approach it from a genuine perspective of like, hey, each one of these players has equal opportunity, equal ability to be great. So let's see how it all pans out. But then there are the others that are going to come at this conversation and come at it from the how can I make myself most right side of the conversation. We're not interested in being the most right. We're interested in looking at what can these players do to make their teams right, because that's what makes teams. That's what gives a team fans to root for, right? To root for them, all these other things. Like, you want to see the success for these players. Not everybody's in that same business, right? And so I think that the overall conversation, and I'm not talking about Lauren and Nick when I'm talking about this, but I'm just saying the overall conversation, like you talk about nationally, is going to be skewed towards it's going to look a lot better for these guys if they're right about Caleb Williams being the wrong pick than it will be if they're right about him being the right pick. And so you're going to see a lot of narratives that are going to be shaded in that way. It has nothing to do with the players. It's got everything to do with the voices.
And I'll tell you this too. I remember the Sacramento Kings in another sport, the NBA, since that's what's going on right now. They had to choose between Tyrese Halliburton and De'Aaron Fox or Kieran Fox. De'Aaron Fox. They chose. Fox is a real good player, but people was like, Halliburton must not be that good. Well, 6 buzzer beaters later, the dude's playing in the finals. And now, just because you have one feeling about one guy doesn't mean you have to just all of a sudden create a feeling in a narrative.
Huge point. Yep. Huge point. You can be pro both these guys. You don't have to be anti one because you're pro the other. You can look at both of these guys and talk about how if you get the right system around them, you get consistency around them. It's what every player needs to be successful in any sport: consistency and in the right system around them that supports what it is that they do well. If both of these players can find that, then they could be in the Super Bowl competing against one another for all we know in 5, 6, 7 years. But until they have that around them, we got to be looking at where it is that you can find that, how it is that they can perform at their best in the situations that they are in, all these other things. But just because you're a big fan of one of them doesn't mean you have to be against the other one.
That's absolutely the truth. We're talking about quarterbacks that were taken in the first round for different teams. What if we're talking about quarterbacks that were taken by different teams in the first round? Now they're on the same team, like with the Indianapolis Colts. I say the Colts, they really, when they say you got 2 quarterbacks, that means you don't have one. They should look that up in the dictionary, and there's a big old picture of an Indianapolis Colt. I tell you that right now. We'll discuss why I feel that way in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Ross, we got to give attention to a couple of teams here in the third segment on Locked On NFL. Well, I don't know if they really deserve attention. I think the hosts of those Locked On NFL podcast shows do in Miami as well as Indy. They're great. Those are my buddies. But I don't know. Sometimes I look at teams and people can say, you cover the Jaguars. How can you say that? And I look at them and I'm like, man, how did they come up with something to talk about them? Talk about today. I've done that before, right? And Ross says, nonsense. Email me, man. I can tell you stuff to talk about.
You. I'll give you all. I'll give you all the topics.
I tell you what. Here's the topic: the quarterback situation between Anthony Richardson and Daniel Jones. Do Colts fans really want to hear that Daniel Jones is lighting it up? I don't know. I ain't saying that that's what these guys from Locked On Colts are saying, but I'm gonna let you hear it for yourself. Here you go.
So, Daniel Jones' performance, I was pleasantly surprised with how he did. It was, last week when we saw him, it was a little bit of just what you would expect. A lot of short to intermediate stuff. I think the big questions about him, obviously other than just kind of just being a dink and dunker and kind of a boring quarterback game manager, he's pushing the ball down the field. Like you see Daniel Jones come out there and perhaps being the starter, and you're say, well, there goes Alec Pierce's value there. But near the end of practice, they did a 2-minute drill, and Jones ripped it and found Pierce for about 40-ish yards or so down the right sideline. And a couple plays later, they went down and scored a 4-yard touchdown to A.D. Mitchell. So I really liked what I saw from Jones out there. During 7-on-7s, he was 3 of 5. His 2 incompletions were caused by Nick Cross, who had a really, really good.
All right, Ross, question for you. Is this a situation where everyone is going to hope that they can find the next Sam Darnold or the next Baker Mayfield, or do you think Daniel Jones does have a legitimate shot to be the starter there in Indy and have it turn out to their advantage?
I think Daniel Jones has a shot in Indy, but he would not have a shot on 31 other teams. I think that he has a shot in Indy because his competition is Anthony Richardson, who has not panned out, right? And I don't think that teams are going to have the patience for an Anthony Richardson in the way that they might have a patience for, let's say, a Caleb Williams, or that they would have, right? Because you drafted Anthony Richardson as a project, and nothing about what the Indianapolis Colts have done have shown any type of patience for that project that they made a decision in which to invest. And so I think the Indianapolis Colts are starting on the wrong foot as a whole. I think Anthony Richardson probably have a better chance somewhere else. And I don't think that Daniel Jones would have a better chance anywhere else. Like, that's kind of the way that I look at it for these. So that's why I say Daniel Jones has a chance. I think that the Indianapolis Colts have 2 quarterbacks and therefore have none because they're in need of a third quarterback. And they're in need of a Kirk Cousins. Like, that's the team where Kirk Cousins makes the most sense to me. There was a lot of talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers, conversation around the New Orleans Saints, which is the most ridiculous thing I've heard most of the offseason. And then even conversations around another team that we'll talk about in a little bit with the Miami Dolphins. But I think that the place where he should land and should be, and that would benefit from him most, would be the Indianapolis Colts. Let Anthony Richardson get his opportunity somewhere else, whether that be after the season or whatever. But to answer your question, yeah, I do think Daniel Jones has a chance, but I think that he shouldn't, because they should be investing in a better option like Kirk Cousins. No
doubt about it. We're going to talk about the Dolphins in just a second. Very rarely do we get breaking news while we're recording here on
I was about to say
NFL. Nick Chubb has agreed to a 1-year agreement to play for the Houston Texans. Real quick on that, Tyler Rowland obviously will have more on that for you early in the morning. Of course, check out Locked On Texans later on with John Hickman and Sarge. Listen, early report. I'm glad for Nick Chubb. This is one of those dudes that career-wise is really he's had a lot of tough times, man. But there's a Hall of Fame player who had some injuries that's going to keep him from that. But this is a sign to me that they're going for it a little bit to make him their backup.
Yeah, I love this. I think this is a good landing spot for Nick Chubb as well, coming off of that injury last year. A lot of concern about whether or not he was going to be back. Now he gets to be in a running back room with Joe Mixon, who cooked last year with the Houston Texans. And then you get Dameon Pierce in there as well, who's a guy that you can still utilize both as a rusher and as a pass protector. So Nick Chubb does not have to be the focus of the Houston Texans run game, which I think is great for him this year, while he's signing a 1-year deal. It's a prove it opportunity for him. And we know, we talked about the impatience for quarterbacks that teams invest in, knowing that they need to put the work in. Then when they realize that they got to do the work, they get afraid of the work. But the patience for running backs is even less so, right? And so I think that getting a guy in the build or getting an opportunity like Nick Chubb has here allows him to be able to take advantage of, like, all right, I got a year, I can prove it, see if I can get another deal after that and everything like that. I think it's a great fit for him. And it's another really outstanding pass protector to have in that backfield for CJ Stroud, and another good versatile player who he doesn't get a lot of credit for it, but can catch out of the backfield too. So you get a little bit of a safety blanket to add to CJ Stroud going into 2025 as well.
One of those teams that seems like they never really get compensation. It makes me think about a scene from Baby Boy when Tyrese looked at his friend and said, "You're either a buyer or a seller. It's commerce, B." Right? So Miami lets Christian Wilkins go and gets nada for him. Right. He's like a $90 million starting 3 technique. And then I'm looking at their roster. I'm like, well, they keep going buying stuff, but they don't sell very well, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now Jalen Ramsey's on the market. I think they're selling to contenders. We talked at the top of the show about Jaire Alexander being free. I think that probably screws up what Kyle Krabs is going to sit here and talk about how the Dolphins move past Jalen Ramsey. I think they're going to move past with a draft pick that's probably around lower than they thought. Myself, Here you go with Kyle Krabs.
As we wait for the first domino to fall, which unfortunately is going to have to be a Ramsey move, it feels like they're not missing the party yet. And for that reason, I'm just patiently waiting, just like the team is, just like everybody is, for this move to happen. And the reason why I think the Ramsey move has to happen first is there's a number of dominoes that can and should fall after Ramsey's off the board, because then you know how much cash you're saving. Right now, if you don't eat any extra salary, you're in line to save $21 million in cash.
Money aside that they're saving, the Miami Dolphins, I don't believe, got a return on this investment. A lot of noise was made about it. They didn't win anything while Jalen was there. To me, it's just been a big waste of time.
Yeah, I mean, it was a big investment for them, and they did not get what they were looking for in that situation. And some of it has to do with Jalen Ramsey or the defense. Some of it has nothing to do with Jalen Ramsey nor the defense. Like, some of it is injuries at the quarterback position, all these other things. Like, there's a lot of stuff that ends up kind of impacting all of it. But it is interesting because, like, the Miami Dolphins are having the offseason that you typically see before a regular season where a head coach is in a lot of trouble. You know what I mean? Like, their offseason right now is a precursor for a troubled regular season. So I'm really interested to see how Miami might be able to circumvent that, ideally, but to see where things go. Jalen Ramsey is going to be really interesting because I think you're right. A team that was interested in Jalen Ramsey all of a sudden has, like we just talked about, cost control options with Jaire Alexander on the. But at the same time, do the Green Bay Packers now enter the sweepstakes in a way that they wouldn't have if Jaire Alexander stayed in Green Bay, right? So it could go one way or another with this situation for sure. But it's interesting to see how this will impact everything.
It is interesting. There are a lot of interesting things, like Jermaine Pratt, this cut day. Yeah, he's getting released from Cincinnati. All of this breaking news, things that you need to look out for with Tyler Rowland in the morning on Locked On NFL PM. But first, I want to tell you this. If you want to know if your team is a good fit for any of these players that are out there and you don't really know what they have on their roster, you need to watch Locked On NFL Scouting with Kyle Krabs, who I just mentioned, as well as Joe Marino. Look, they have fun digging through tape and finding out who number 75 is on your minicamp roster, right? So when they have that kind of fun, you got to love it. Make sure you get on over to Locked On NFL Scouting. They're the best in the business, and make that your second listen. Ross Jackson is going to be busy, obviously, with Locked On Saints, and I'll do Locked On Jaguars as well. But make sure you tap in around the network to make sure that you stay in tune with Locked On Podcast Network and the Locked On NFL. We will be here every single day wherever you get your podcasts. And we appreciate you spending time with us, making us your first listen. For Ross Jackson, Tony Wiggins, we will see you tomorrow here on Locked On NFL.